Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Harris. I'm with the Writer's Block Bookstore in Winter Park and Winter Garden, Florida. I am here tonight to introduce our guests. Our first very prestigious guest is Arianna Huffington. She's the author of 15 books. She is the founder of the Huffington Post, and she is the CEO and founder of Thrive Global, which is a leading behavioral change tech company whose mission is to dispute and get rid of the delusion that we all have to be burned out to be successful. We are also here with Marina Khidekel, who is Thrive Global's head of content development. Marina's also been a top editor at many different magazines and media outlets, including Women's Health, Glamour, and my favorite, Cosmopolitan. And then finally, Gabrielle Bernstein is a #1 New York Times best-selling author. She's a motivational speaker. She's a spiritual leader. She has been working very hard on her latest book, and she hosts a podcast that many of you are probably familiar with. I'm now going to kick it over to the three speakers tonight, and I assure you, you're going to have a wonderful time.
Hi, ladies. I'm so happy to be here with both of you. I have this this selfish moment being part of any kind of Zoom conversation that I get to see people that I love, and while this is for everyone that's watching, it's very much for myself as well. I'm just happy to be with you both, and I miss you both, and I would love to hug both of you so closely. So I'm so thrilled to be here in celebration of the book, and I think that's the perfect place to start, is really giving voice to what this mission of this book is, because there is such a strong through line and mission for the Thrive Global intention in the world and everything that you bring forth. And I wanted to hear, Arianna, how that lends itself to the mission behind the book, and in your words, what this book is about and how it is more resonant now than ever.
So, Gabby, I'm so happy to be with you. We've been part of each other's lives for so many years, and it touches my heart to see all the impact you're having in the world while being so open about your own journey, including becoming a mother that I'm so excited about. As you know, I'm a kind of obsessed mother. So it's great to be with you as Marina and I are launching this baby out into the world. And for me, what this book is about is really my passion about helping people go from knowing what to do to actually doing it. Mm-hmm. As you know, that's why I left the Huffington Post, because you can raise awareness through media, and we did tons of that. But you can't really help people to make these small incremental changes in their lives that add up to big changes. And so I launched Thrive Global in 2016 to do just that. And we base it on this system of Microsteps. And so we put all these steps together in the book, so that especially right now, Gabby, as you know, people are so burnt out. There is that sense of trauma after the year we've been through. And we wanted to give them something that was very easy, the opposite of a daunting life overhaul. That through these small daily incremental steps that we call too small to fail, and also we call it the judgment-free zone.
Yep.
You can't do it wrong. To begin to see the impact that it has on our happiness, on our health, on our professional success, on everything that we wish for in our lives.
So let's talk about the Microsteps, because I've always had this mantra that lots of little right actions will guide me towards my biggest goals. And so, and often when people say, well, how did you write 9 books in 11 years? lots of little right actions. And I know that you'd say the same. How did you write 15 books? How did you, anything that you've created in your life, not just professionally, but personally. So I'd love to hear from you. What does it mean to take a micro step?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Go, Marina, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So you're absolutely right, Gabby. And to Ariana's point, everything now feels more daunting than normal. And we talk about New Year's resolutions. Well, there's a reason why over 50% of them fail. People want to do a lot, and there's nothing wrong with aiming big, but we can really help ourselves by starting small. And science tells us it's those small steps that help us build habits that lead to better well-being, more creativity, more connectivity with others, meaningful connection. So Microsteps, the definition is actually there's small science-backed actions that we can take immediately to build healthy habits that significantly improve our lives in all these realms. And Ariana's 100% right. We call them too small to fail. This book, you can't do this system wrong. You can dip in to any chapter that you want to see change in your life and just start really small. Microsteps help us feel more in control. They give us something to celebrate every day. Even if I didn't, do something huge, I did something small for me. And it's a muscle. And the more we do them, the more we build this muscle and create even more wins in our lives and good habits.
Yeah. And you set yourself up for winning rather than fearing failure, because if you're just taking these small actions and these small steps, then how can you fail? I would love to hear from both of you some examples of your own micro steps. I'm always fascinated by what other people do in their own personal growth world. So I'd love to hear from both of you what some of your best, most important micro steps are. You can start.
Well, since today we're focusing more on relationships and communication, we are finding that when we are burnt out and depleted, we are at our worst. We are like our worst version of ourselves. And so the micro step that I love the most is based on the latest science that it takes 60 to 90 seconds to course correct from stress. So while stress is unavoidable, cumulative stress is avoidable. And it's cumulative stress that's the killer in terms of our health, but also in terms of our relationships. Because when I'm stressed out, I'm more reactive, I'm less empathetic, I'm less willing to listen and to really listen. And these are all incredibly detrimental for relationships. So we have this 60-second reset micro step. How do you start your day in the morning with 60 seconds of deep breathing before you go to your phone? How do you habit stack 60 seconds of gratitude while you are walking to the bathroom, washing your hands, while you are doing all these things that don't require your brain? How can you include 60 seconds between Zoom meetings? So very small, very manageable, but transformational in terms of how we show up in our meetings, in our relationships with our kids, with our partners, professionally.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's when you add up those small micro steps, there's, to your point, it's backed with science, but it's also energetically developing a new way of being slowly and without having to force yourself into something, or the greatest ways that we can create long-lasting change are through those micro steps. Beautiful. Marina, what are your micro steps?
Well, Ariana touched on one of my favorites, and we're going to talk more about connections with others, but we also talk a lot in this book about connecting with yourself and connecting with that place of wisdom within yourself. And we can't do that without giving ourselves some silence, right? So as Ariana said, it only takes 60 seconds. The one that really changed me is taking 60 seconds right when I wake up before I check my phone. Because when we start our day with checking our phones, we start it focused on, what other people want from us in our emails, or, what inspires others if we scroll through social media, or the scary news headlines of the day, rather than what we want from our day. So I take that 1 minute and I set my intention for the day, or just take a few breaths for 60 seconds, super micro. Or I habit stack and I drink a glass of water in the morning because we wake up so dehydrated, and then I've done something else. But I take that minute and then I go to my phone. And that really changed my mornings and how I approach my day, with less anxiety, focused on what I want out of the day and how I want to. It changed how I interact with people. It changed how, creatively I approach my work. So that starting the day with that one moment of connection with yourself really helped me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And you both mentioned that we're mainly here to talk about relationships and connection. And particularly as women, our brains are hardwired for connection and communication. And as humans, it's one of the driving forces of our well-being. Our ability to connect and communicate our ability to connect physically has obviously been taken away from us this year. And so with that, I would love to discuss some of the micro steps that we can take. And this is for you, Ariana, to enhance our connection to others when we have to be apart. It's so vital that we have this.
So actually, when we enhance our connection with those who we are together and with ourselves, that's when we can also transfer it to those who are apart. I mean, if we are disconnected from ourselves, it's really impossible to connect with others. And for those who have little children like you have, it's actually an incredible micro step of connection, because having like any time when you can be fully present with your child who is fully present with you, like it fills you up.
Totally.
For connections with others. So for me, it's about using these micro steps of connecting with ourselves. Breathing, as you know, you've written so much about it, is a superpower. So there are tons of micro steps based on breathing that prepare us for connection with others. One of my favorites in the book is box breathing, which Navy SEALs use to reduce stress. And it's, as you know, inhale to the count of 4, pause to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 4. And I love the fact that it introduces the concept of pause, which is very hard in our frenetic lives. So doing some box breathing before we connect with others on Zoom, say, helps us reconnect with ourselves. And we are actually launching the Thrive Reset app on Zoom.
Oh, cool. No way. Really?
Yes.
A reset app on Zoom.
On Zoom.
You're a genius. I love you. From beds for your iPhone to an app on Zoom. I just think you're brilliant. Okay, excellent. Beautiful news.
Because, we need little rituals.
Right.
To be able to reinforce our connection with ourselves and our connection with others.
Yeah.
So breathing is key. The other is gratitude. Every opportunity to remember what we're grateful for. Gratitude is the biggest antidote to anxiety. Like, we cannot be grateful and anxious at the same time.
Yep.
And especially during a time of incredible uncertainty, our primitive brain is very likely to go to negative fantasies. I tell my daughters, stop losing in your own fantasies. They're your own, make them good. So when we switch instead to the gratitude channel through these gratitude micro steps that we have, when we wake up, when we wash our hands, before we go to sleep, every moment we can catch, it makes it easier to come present and do less negative fantasizing.
Right. And I couldn't agree with you more about what you said about having a small child, given the circumstances that we've been living in. I think that having a young toddler around was the greatest presence of a micro step in my life, because there's no choice but to be fully present. That little baby will pull my face and say, look at me, mama. So to see what's right in front of you as well. And how can we bring this into our connections with colleagues, Marina? And when it's, something like going on a Zoom call or feeling disconnected from our coworkers at this time, the two of you are really running a big team. And how do you create that connection and resilience in your co-working relationships via Zoom?
You are so right, Gabby. This is about resilience. Connection makes us feel better emotionally. It makes us feel more engaged and energized at work. Studies tell us that, and meaningful interactions in our days actually fill up our reserves of resilience so that we can be better and, in difficult times or make difficult decisions. So, it is harder on Zoom. And like you said, your little boy grabs your face and says, look at me. I mean, we all want to do that sometimes, and everyone wants to be seen. And, it's really difficult, especially these times. One of my favorite micro steps is to even, on Zoom, even digitally, swap "how are you" for a deeper question. How many times do we go through our day and say, how are you? Great, fine. How are you? Okay, yeah, whatever. And it seems like a throwaway, but instead of how are you, just ask something else. What's on your mind? Ariana loves that question. What's on your mind? She
That's
starts
a beautiful
every one-on-one with
question.
that question. Or what challenges are you facing? Or how can I help you right now? It gives you that chance to learn about their experience and really see them and honor their experiences.
I'm going to use that. Thank you. I'm going to start asking people what's on your mind. I think that's so generous. It's
Ariana classic.
Ariana classic. I love it. It's so beautiful. And when we start our company Monday meetings, my main team will do a gratitude. And even if it takes 35 minutes out of our time of the meeting, it's actually what the meeting's there for. Like, we have a list of things we have to get through, but if we don't do those gratitudes, then there's no reason in connecting in that way, because we need that connection. And it is possible on Zoom. We've seen it. We've done our best this year. We're still doing it right here, right now, creating connection. I feel so grateful to be connecting to both of you in this moment. And Ariana, listen, you are the mother of all mothers. You have this deep relationship with your daughter, but you also, I feel, have this very maternal energy with people that you don't even know. You and I have been friends for a long time, but dipping in, dipping out, I've always felt this very loving, nurturing energy from you. And so I just want to address what you're writing about as it relates to mother's gifts as a communicator.
Yes, well, first of all, I'm full of maternal energy towards you, Gabby. You know that. And I'm so excited every time I see what you're doing and the impact you have on the world, and also what you are teaching the world now, having been a mother.
Yeah.
Because I feel one of the biggest lessons I learned, which has been an incredible communication microstep, is watching, let's say, Oliver's age, who's 2.5. And you have that moment when you say no to something and he has a temper tantrum and he gets upset. And then literally 60 seconds later, he's beaming and the sun is out and it's all forgotten. And I feel that's the microstep we need in our lives.
Right.
So whether it's with colleagues or in our personal lives, we are going to get upset. That's life. That's a given. So let's not pretend that we can walk through life in a saintly way, not frustrated, not upset by anything. Let's express it and move on. I mean, Marina and I work very closely together. So she knows that once I express something, it's done. It's like, it's not just that I don't hold on to it. I frankly don't even remember.
Yep.
True.
Well, you don't have time for it.
There's no ruminating. No ruminating allowed.
It's done. But if you don't express it, you harbor it, it festers, it becomes toxic. And really, I think you should, I know you don't want Oliver in public, but we should actually videotape little children, because that transition from the world is coming to an end upset to I'm so happy, smile, is so quick and so full and utter.
Yeah, and it's actually something that's a practice that I've been applying in my no drama discipline vibe here in my home. I practice the work of Dan Siegel and with my child, and he teaches connect and redirect. And that's actually such a beautiful thing that we can do for ourselves as a micro step, which is for my son, I can't ask him in the middle of the tantrum to go and try something different. I have to connect with him. I have to put my hand on his shoulder, give him a hug if he's open to it, and really see him. And in my voice, in my tone, I'll say to him, I see you. It's so hard to be a little boy. It's so hard to not get what you want. Connection, connection, connection. Mm-hmm. And then through that connection, he can go from that lower brain to his upper brain where he can start to make decisions and change his mind and do something different. That's when we can redirect. But we all have to do that for ourselves. We have to make sure that we're connecting with where we're at in that moment, using box breath, feeling into something, and really allowing ourselves to be present with our feelings, because that's where what we spoke about earlier, the resilience comes in. When we allow ourselves to fully feel our feelings, even if it's 90 seconds, breathing into the feeling, we can allow it to move through us. And that's when we can redirect into gratitude or redirect into a question for someone else or whatever it might be. And we have to be like that all day long right now, because every moment of our life, we're being hit with these really scary stories, really uncomfortable moments, lots of challenges in life. And so we need to build up that resilience within ourselves through the micro step of allowing ourselves to be very present and caring and parenting ourselves in many ways, by allowing ourselves to feel our truth. Yeah.
And technology just pinging us every 2 minutes, it's one of the things that makes it harder and harder to be an effective listener, communicate well today, is our dependence on our devices. Studies have found just the mere presence of a phone in the room, even if it's face down, even if it's in your bag, it limits our cognitive capacity even. And it actually has negative effects on this closeness that we can have in conversation. People see it and they know that we're not fully present. I've been guilty of it. It's something that I'm working on with my partner, and breaks my heart when he's like, "Oh, it's okay, I'm used to it." I'm like, "No, don't get used to it.
Don't get used to it." Yeah. So, that's a tough one.
That's like a big part of communication micro steps in our system, which is how do we navigate technology? Okay. What are the micro steps around our phones that we can start with? Whether it's, as you know, we are big believers in turning off our phones and charging them outside the bedroom. But again, if that seems like too big a micro step, start with one night. And then gradually increase to doing it every night, because you see how much better you sleep, how you wake up fully recharged, and so you get the benefit. Mm-hmm. So we feel that when we begin to practice these micro steps, we begin to connect with a deeper, more resilient, more creative, stronger part of ourselves. And so it becomes like a magnet.
Yep. And I want to acknowledge also the micro steps that we can take to begin a healthy sleep ritual, because listen, one of the things I admire most about the work that you both do is the emphasis on sleep and how it is the most valuable self-care practice. Because as you guys know, I suffered with insomnia when I had a postpartum depression. And in that experience, I had to actually rebuild my sleep back. And my old sleep habits were no longer going to cut it after having to come through that. So the micro steps of putting my phone outside the room, no longer watching, using the phone at least 1 hour before I go to bed, powering down at least 1 hour before I go to bed, not having any big talk at night. These are all micro steps, but when you add them up, I sleep 10 hours a night now, ladies.
Oh my God, that's amazing. You're my hero.
I am my own hero. But it's it is those micro steps.
Yes, and then you can keep adding. A micro step that I love now is having a hot bath.
Yep.
At the end of the day, which is not for cleanliness. It's really like a ritual. It's washing the day away, or a hot shower if you prefer, or reading only physical books in bed. So you can stack up the micro steps, which are like transition micro steps, because again, back to little children, you don't just drop them in bed. There's a whole transition of good night moon and a bath and a lullaby, and we need a transition for ourselves. Going back to what you said about parenting ourselves.
We need a downtime routine, and then we need our micro steps for building up in the beginning of the day. And I think that just to close this conversation, I think that it's really important for anyone who's listening to really trust that this message is coming at the right time, because the way to get through difficult times is not to be the hero of everything overnight. It's about really showing up for the small moments and the presence in each moment. And I think that's what I appreciate most about this book and about all of the work that you both do. Before we close, is there any last things that you want to share about the book, about connecting at this time? Anything that we want to close with? Marina?
I was just going to say, Gabby, you are the guru of communication and relationships. So this has been such an honor to have you here. And you touched on so many of the beautiful qualities of this book. It's that we don't have to do a huge life overhaul in our communication and relationships or in anything else. You know, we can start anywhere, and we can start really, really small. And I love the micro steps that you do too. In fact, the one that I do before bed is an alarm. I set it when it's time to do that wind down routine. I look at the clock now. Ariana has this belief that you should go to bed before midnight. And so now when I see 11:45 in my mind, it's like 11:40 thrive. It's like, if I'm not winding down by then, I've done it wrong that night. And of course, some nights I fall off, but then you get back on, you know, and it helps prime me for sleep. And it's also, you know, a no judgment zone if I don't do it one night.
I'll already have been asleep for 3 hours by the time you're going.
Again, you're my hero.
But I also have an alarm clock called Oliver, who likes to scream mama at 6:45 in the morning. You know, so Ariana, how would you like to leave us on this beautiful conversation?
I would like to leave us on a very optimistic note, because we are at this amazing moment when we can really use this crisis of the pandemic as a catalyst for fundamental changes that we should have made anyway pre-pandemic, and not return to our breathless, frenetic lives. And to know that we can build these new lives through these micro steps, instead of feeling that we have to dramatically change everything, and begin it in a joyful way, without judgments, in every area of our lives, including meaning and purpose, and remembering, you know, my favorite Rumi quote, live life as though everything is rigged in your favor.
Yeah.
And taking whatever happens and using it as grist for the mill, using it for our own growth, but without this kind of breathless way of saying we have to keep growing every day, but integrating it into our lives in this very organic and authentic way. Thank you so much for guiding this conversation and for being such an amazing guide for so many people.
Thank you both. I think that what you're sharing tonight reminds me of something that I often say as we close. Is people always say, you know, there's this spiritual part of your life or the personal growth part of your life. But I really think it's about living a life of growth, living a spiritual life.
Yeah.
So when we see these as micro steps, then it's consistent and it's repetitive, and it creates that steadiness and that resilience. And I just want to thank you both. So thank you guys for this beautiful conversation. I'm full with connection. I feel so loved up, and I can't wait to see you both in person.
Yes.
On this beautiful book. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. We love you.
Oliver from us.
I will.
Thank you. And Ariana, thank you so much. You were amazing. I want to introduce our Chief Training Officer, Joey Hubbard. He's going to be leading a half-an-hour workshop with us. And Ariana and Joey go way back, right?
We go way, way back, 40 years. Joy was the first person I reached out to when I decided to launch Thrive. And he has been an amazing leader at Thrive and beloved by tens of thousands of people around the world. So I'm so happy Joy will lead this workshop. Love you, Marina.
Love you.
Joy.
Thank you, Ariana.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jared.
so
Love
much.
you.
So everyone, as Joey is talking, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We're going to pause around 10 minutes before the program is over and ask as many of your questions as you can. But Joey's going to take us a little bit deeper into the science of microsteps around communication and relationships. Take it away, Joey.
Thanks, Marina. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you. I want to share today the content on how we focus Microsteps around this idea of communication and relationships. As you heard from them, this is a time in particular now, because what we've seen in this last year and a half, 13 months or so, is we've been missing connection. And connection is one of the vital elements for recharging the brain. When we think about the 4 big areas for keeping our brain at its best, it's movement, it's sleep, it's nutrition, and it's connection. And what we've lost over this last 13 months is our ability to have those spontaneous interactions that occur in offices where you're walking by someone, say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I love that sweater, or what happened at home, or love that game last night, or whatever it was there is that you used to be talking about. You get these sparks. And in the brain, what it looks like is you get an endorphin boost, a serotonin boost, oxytocin boost, even a dopamine boost from those conversations. And they can last for 30 minutes to an hour just from that one interaction. And so we are missing that during this time period. And one of the challenges around that is when we do, we've turned to devices as our means of trying to create connection. And one of the interesting pieces there is that we're seeing that for young people, young, you determine what it is, but it's more next gen, is they can actually experience some connection through devices. For those of us that might be a little bit older, it's much more difficult for us to perceive true connection through a device. So that's been challenging for all of us. So how do you create these build these connections right now? And the good news is we're coming back out of this, right? So we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. But one of the things I just ask you to think about is what gets in the way for you. Now, again, we can use this idea of, well, I'm not able to be with them as our excuse, but I want you to go deeper than that. Ask yourself, what is it for me? Even when I could and can be around people, what might get in my way? Is there something that I hold back with being around people? Or is there some area of discomfort? Or is there some part of me that gets uncomfortable when conversation goes beyond just, transactional? And it's just an awareness point for you. But I will tell you, all the research that we've been looking at, I don't know if you're aware of some of the longevity studies that Harvard did, but we'll talk about why it's important to have meaningful connection in your life, not just short-term, but long-term. Think about, though, in terms of mindset. We talk about mindset because we know beliefs drive what we do. And when we believe something, our brain literally sees, hears, and feels the world through that lens. So if I believe I'm too busy, I've got too much going on to have these meaningful conversations in my workday, as Gabby was talking about, it's challenging because you won't see, feel, or hear the world in a way that allows you to do that. You'll just, it's like, hey, I'd love to have more connections, but I'm just too busy. And that will be the way that you live your life. It isn't that it's not possible, it's that that's what you believe. And so that's how you will actually act and react in the world. Or connecting with others is impossible during the pandemic. Great reasons, right? Great reasons, given the fact that it's more challenging for those of us who are trying to connect through a screen, who are maybe kinesthetic learners. Kinesthetic learners learn through touch and feel. Audio learners learn through what they hear. Visual learners learn by what they see. So visual and auditory learners have been able to kind of navigate this time period a little bit more effectively than kinesthetic learners who often need to feel something. And if they're not feeling or touching or connecting, they sometimes can feel disconnected. So how do you do it even during this time period? And then I'm too shy. Shy is not a default. It's not or a defect. It is something that we can start to live in a way that prevents us from even reaching out. And shy has something behind it. And I would encourage you all to ask yourself, if you feel like you're a shy person, why is it that you are willing to reach out to some and not others? What is it that happens in your brain when you say hi to somebody or you talk to somebody? There's a deeper element here when we call limiting paradigms, where when you start to go into the idea that I don't feel good enough, I don't feel worthy, I don't feel like I deserve it, we pull back in our interactions with others because of how we can treat ourselves internally. And I'd encourage you to start to be kinder, gentler, more loving, more caring with yourself, because that thing allows you to then be more comfortable with others. It's always going to be inside out. So checking in on what you're saying to yourself inside is important to understanding how you can be more effective outside. Here's what we know. Okay, so they did a longevity study at Harvard on happiness. And what's interesting is this was I think a 90-year study. And what they found is that people who were living longer, the number one most important factor was positive relationships. Having close positive relationships was the most important factor for longevity. Now, when you think about this, what does that mean, positive relationship? Now, again, it can be family, it can be friends, it can be community. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 or 15. What matters, though, is that you have positive social relationships. So find ways, because of the pandemic, if you find yourself more alone right now, and that's a reality of a lot of people. I tell teams, we work with companies, check in. Don't let anybody on your team be by themselves. The two groups, young people tend to be by themselves quite often. They haven't gotten to the point where they're married and have kids and all that in the home. So we see it with young people. They're struggling quite a bit due to that. And then older people who just through the course of their lives don't have a relationship currently, and they're in a state where they're by themselves more. Those two groups have struggled during this time. So whether you're a person that reaches out to others to make sure that's the case, or even if you're somebody who's by yourself, I want you to start practicing reaching out. I had a woman say to me today on one of our calls, I'm the one that always reaches out. Nobody ever reaches out to me. And I got to the point where I just stopped doing it. And I said, okay, and are you happy? And she said, no, I'm miserable. I said, okay, so don't make this a right thing. Make this a happy thing. Sometimes we'd rather be right than happy. Be happy. Reach out to people anyway. I said, do you ever reach out and people go, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sad you reached out to me. She said, no, they're always happy. I said, okay. So, some people just are different, but don't allow yourself to be by yourself because somebody didn't reach out to you. So again, here's our book. We've talked about it. It is, quite a few microsteps across many areas, but in this particular area of communication and relationships, there's lots of tiny steps that we can teach you about what you can do. I'm going to give you a few of them now. The first one is, remember this idea we call it relational energy. Vivek, who is now the current Surgeon General, he wrote this when he was really talking about what happens when we get connection. Now, part of what we know is connection is also one of the big drivers to overall performance. Maybe the most important thing, if you're a leader, to building great performance on your teams is creating great connection with your people. So, and one thing to understand is that it's a really important dynamic connection. It's not just for the relationship you have with others, but it's also for motivation, for energy, for productivity. It all kicks in together, okay? So here's a couple of tools. When you have people who you're connected with at work, you're 7 times more likely to be engaged in their work. We found that people will say, I'm gonna not take this other job just because I enjoy the people I work with here. Jobs offering more money, more benefits, more X, more Y. That's okay. I'd rather stay here with people that I love and care about. Especially when you think about millennials and next gen. They would much rather be at a job where there's purpose, there's connection, than a job that brings them money and more benefits. So 7 times more likely to be engaged, right? When you have friends at work. So build relationships. And look, you may say, I don't want 800 friends at work. That's fine, but have some, because there's inspiration to show up when you people that you love and care about. So I heard the team talk about this, swapping how are you for a deeper question. Some of the questions I use, Ariana says, what's on your mind? Some of the questions I use are, how are things at home? What do you do to take care of yourself? Is there anything you're struggling with? Like, I'll ask really sort of direct questions that give people an opportunity to reflect on specifics. And the reason why that can be helpful, if you're a leader in particular, but just with anybody that you love and care about, how are you taking care of yourself? If someone says, oh, I'm not doing a great job of that, I'm not sleeping very well, I'm not X, Y, and Z, you know immediately that you need to get them sleeping better, because that's going to affect their ability to just be, themselves, be their best selves as a human. So it can be a good question. Just check in a little bit beyond how are you. Mary talks about, asking a friend or a coworker at least one question a day. And what's interesting, when you show curiosity, people actually really respond to that. You want to build psychological safety in your environment, be curious and ask questions, and again, not about prying or not about, being overly personal, but just say, hey, you look great. What are you doing? Are you working out? Or any of those things where you can check in with people and they start to talk back with you can be really important, because that gives you information. We learn by checking in, asking people questions. John talks about the right kinds of questions, open-ended questions where the people can't just go yes or no. Like, how you doing? Fine. Is everything good? Yes. Right. Those are closed questions, right? Open-ended questions are questions like, what do you do to take care of yourself? Then they actually have to think about and give you a response. And it's powerful. I really liked Larry King, and he was actually, one of his wives was a friend of my mom's. And I say one because he had a few of them, but they had a retrospective on him, and they were talking about, Larry's interviews, and they showed a quote. He said, I interviewed 50,000 people in my life. And said, in that process, he said, I never learned anything while I was talking. Everything I learned happened while I was listening. And it's really powerful to really consider this idea that listening is a response, and a very powerful response. And so part of the thing you can do is make sure you're creating environments where people feel safe to talk, where they hear that you listen. People feel engaged when they feel valued, when they feel cared for, and when they feel heard. And listening gives them all 3 of those experiences. So listening and appreciating are 2 tools that I say, works with everyone. It has to be authentic, because when you give appreciation, people hear it and they feel it. And they know if it's something that's real or something you're just saying just because you're trying to be appreciative. But take time, pay attention to the people that are around you. And when they do little things, make sure you let them know that you notice, and it's like, some days I have 10 webinars in a row, and I'll go downstairs and I'll get something to eat, and I don't have time to even wash my dishes or clean it off. I just put it in the sink and go upstairs. And so my wife will sometimes just clean those up. And at the end of the day, I'll go downstairs and I'll clean up, and I'll always tell her, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that goes a long way for her feeling okay sometimes about doing my dishes. And yes, we do that in households where you have partnerships. But I would say, I've been married 31 years. You still say thank you for those things, because we often forget to appreciate those that are closest to us. It's easier to appreciate the people that you aren't around a lot. It takes a little more effort and a little more focus to think about the things that people around you, close to you, do. So make it fun. Get get generous with them. Make sure that you are expressing it in lots of ways. It makes a huge difference short term, but also long term. So with your partner, here's a couple of tools. Schedule some one-on-one time. Now you say schedule, why? Well, maybe you both have very busy lives. You're both working, you're both going. And there might be natural connection points, but I'd encourage you to just get one-on-one time that you go, hey, we're going to take some time and just take a walk. When can we do it? Okay, let's go Wednesday. We're going to take a walk in the afternoon at this time. Okay, great. And you got in the plan, and then keep it. You got to keep the agreement. Don't change it just because, oh, well, I don't feel like it. No, make sure you do it. That builds connection, it builds relationship, but it also builds that communication, that how's it going? Tell me what's going on. What am I not seeing? What do I need to pay attention to more? All of that stuff can happen when you schedule and create that time. And this is I thought this is a funny quote, because it's you've heard it before and we've seen it, but this was back thousands of years ago. They're still thinking this idea of listening being important. So I would encourage you to be actively focusing on being a good listener. You can decide, hey, I'm going to go have a conversation with someone, but I'm just going to ask, hey, tell me how you're doing, what's going on in your life. Then I'm going to shut up. With my wife, and this is something for all relationships, sometimes people like to be problem solvers. And it's interesting because, they see a lot of men go into logic brain and go immediately to, oh, you're telling me about a problem, let's think about how we solve it. And for a lot of women, they would prefer to just be heard. They're not necessarily looking for that solution. And even in same-sex partnerships, that you can have one person that is more on the, hey, I just want to share my feelings, and one person that's, okay, what are we going to do about it? So no matter what the dynamic is, if you're that person that always wants to solve, slow down and take time and just practice listening. And my tool is, when I get to the end of those conversations with my wife, I'll say, great, now is there anything I can do for you? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, I'm good. I just wanted to let you know. But every once in a while, it's like, yeah, here's what I'd love. Then I can get into solution mode. But I used to many years ago, go right into, okay, let's solve it. And it's like, no, that's not, I don't need all that. And it would confuse me. Like, wait a minute, didn't you just tell me your problem? So I had to learn how to be a listener more than just trying to drive people into action. And then one of the things I love how Angela talks about this is get people to tell you their story. And she loves this idea of really, someone she doesn't know very well, getting them inspired. Like, okay, so what did you get into the idea of doing X, Y, and Z? How did you get it? What did you, and she asked the kind of question, she says that it goes beyond small talk. It's like really beginning to learn about someone. So she sits down with real serious curiosity. I want to learn about you, and not to interview you, but just learn about you. And then in our conversation together, we walk away, you know more about me, I know more about you, but it feels real to her. It doesn't feel like it's just small talk. So let me pause here, and I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. We've got about 8 minutes, and just talk about any questions that anyone might have about any of this. And Marina, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of moderate.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone, please continue to put your questions in the chat. We've gotten good ones that I don't think all the attendees can see. But Joey, you talk a lot about feedback, right? Feedback as being just information. But sometimes feedback, feedback at work can be hard to take. Can you talk to us a little bit about how to make that feedback loop easier to take, and any mindset shifts that we can use?
Yeah, well, one of the issues that people have with feedback is, in giving it, they are looking for approval. So they're concerned about saying something that will lose approval. A lot of people have that as their concern in delivering clear feedback. So the feedback gets delivered in ways that is sticky, it's messy, it's not understandable, and it's more about emotion than information. So that's on the giving side. On the receiving side, we've attached so much of our value to how we're perceived in the world, to what we do, to what we have, to what people think about us. So when we receive feedback, what will often happen is people will think, well, this means that I'm not X, Y, and Z because they're giving me this feedback. They connect that feedback with their value. And so this is a really important element, to disassociate this feedback with who you are, but with what people are observing about your behavior. So feedback is information from any source that lets you know how you're doing or how you're being perceived, right? That's not who you are as a person. That's information about what you might do to course correct. You're on this road that's taking you to Atlanta, but you said you wanted to go to New York. And they're saying to you, hey, you're driving to Atlanta. You might want to take a different road. And then you get to go, oh, okay, great. But nobody, if someone says that to you, is going to go, oh my God, I can't believe it. You said I'm going to Atlanta. I wanted to go and get up. No one gets upset. They go, thank you. I wanted to go to New York. And so that's how you understand that feedback is simply data that gives you information. Now, does everyone deliver it in the cleanest, most effective way? No. Your job sometimes is to distill through all of that and ask for what's the information I can get from this that will allow me to have the success I want in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. I mean, when I first heard you say feedback is just information, it shifted something. It was a mindset shift for me. You know, you're so right. We connect the feedback we get at work from our loved ones, wherever, to who we are and how we see ourselves, the stories we tell about ourselves to ourselves. But it's not that. It's just information that we can filter, and that was so freeing to me. It was awesome. Ariana and Gabby, we were talking a little bit about almost the idea of forgiveness, of making amends, of moving past, you know, a conflict. We're going to have conflicts. Those conflicts are unavoidable. You know, for some people, it seems to be easier to sort of forget and move on. Ariana's like, once I've said something, I'm done, you know, and other people sort of ruminate and stew. And it's like, you know, tell me any tips you have for better forgiving and making amends after a conflict?
Well, I think it's important for people to recognize forgiveness isn't for someone else. The reason why you do forgiveness is to resolve the conflict that you're having internally. Yeah. See, when I get upset about what you say or do, the only person that's paying the price for that is me. You know, I can act like I have that towards you and send my little negative vibe at you, but you're doing your thing. How many of you have ever been mad at somebody and later you said, I've been mad at you? And they go, really? Why? They had no idea. So you're the one who's doing that to yourself. So forgiveness is actually the greatest gift you can give yourself. Mm-hmm. The reason why you do forgiveness is so I don't have to walk around in upset and anger and whatever it is that I'm holding against you. So it's an extremely powerful tool to being free inside. I had a team that I went in to work with, and a bunch of them were leaving, and they were leaving because they were pissed off at something someone had done in the organization 6 months before. And I said, okay, did you guys talk about this? They said, no, we've been talking about it as a group, but we never told the person. And I said, well, they just spent 6 months being upset and they're all leaving without ever having had a conversation because they couldn't let it go. Who's paying the price? So remember, forgiveness is for you, so you can be in your best self. And then when you go back to the other person, it's like, I've let it go. You know, we may need to talk through stuff, but I'm not holding on to this for my own benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of my favorite microsteps in the book, it's actually in the focus and prioritization chapter, I believe. But the book is a system. One of these elements of our lives doesn't work without the others. So it could just as well be in communication and relationships. And that microstep is take 1 minute to think of something you want to let go of today.
Right.
You know, it could be a task that you want to delegate, but it could also be a resentment. That's or right. Lurking, lingering, bad feeling towards someone. And if each day we can just take 1 minute or even less, 30 seconds to think of something we want to let go in terms of our resentments and pent up feelings, I think that's really helpful, right?
I tell people we have a choice every day and it's constant. Do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? And we can be right and upset and, you know, disturbed at what this person did, or we can be happy and just let it go and move on. So the unfortunate thing is most human beings would rather be right. Just say, I want to be right. I want to both, actually. I want to be right. And, you know, you get all the arguments, but you often have to give up being right to be happy.
Yeah. And I want to be mindful of time. So this will be the last question. But, you know, a lot of us are feeling anxiety about returning back to some semblance of normal, including reconnecting with people. You know, Libby is asking, what can I do to prepare to catch up with loved ones, bring more energy? Is it normal to have anxiety in advance of catching up with someone after a long time? And I think we can all relate to that.
It is. And many organizations are struggling with how they're going to actually navigate that process. Many of us have gotten just as comfortable being by ourselves as we were around being with others prior to all of this. So expect some anxiety. And you may go back going, okay, this is new. So baby step it, you know, take care of yourself. Just notice, okay, I'm a little uncomfortable with everybody today. All right, breathe, you know, do some of the tools and the Microsteps in the book. Box breathe, slow down, take deep breaths, relax. Give yourself the acclimation time you might need, and don't beat yourself up because of it. You're like readjusting like a kid, going back to, you know, going to kindergarten for the first time, or going to first grade after they went to kindergarten. They have excitement, but they also have trepidation going on at the same time. You're going to have some of that for some of you. Some of you can't wait. You know, it's like, I'm hugging everybody. I don't care about COVID. But some people are going to be in that process. So give yourself permission to go through it.
And I think we should talk about it openly, like this anxiety that we might be having, and those people who are like, I cannot wait, I'm going to hug everyone. You know, the one beautiful thing about this time is that a lot of us have reconnected with sort of the introvert in us. So some people might be feeling anxious, and, you know, some people might be just like jumping out of their skin to hug and talk to people.
That's right. I'm worried about you. Your office, you guys, Marina's posted up in an office in our offices, and everybody's going to come raiding it was the old relaxation and meditation room.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm
not there now, but yeah, every day I go because I can walk to the office and hole up in a little room, and the rest of the office is like glass and everyone can see everyone. So it's going to be a transition for me to like be out in the open again. Joey, I might have to come get your counsel.
That's all right.
I want to be mindful of time. So we're going to wrap up. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us and supporting this book and supporting Thrive, and Ariana and I, and Gabby was wonderful, and Joey, you were incredible. So I want to thank Writer's Block Bookstore too for hosting us, and everyone who came tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Writer's Block.
Have a great night.